Omegas exist to serve. They are the weakest link in the pack, born to submit and fade into shadows. That's what Sarah's father told her the night he cast her out of the Silvercrest pack. But Sarah would learn that when you have nothing left to lose, you discover a strength that even alphas fear, the kind that makes kings kneel and ancient laws shatter like glass. Chapter 1. The Wolfless Omega. The morning they discovered Sarah couldn't shift was the morning her life ended. She was 16 when the other wolves her age went through their first transformation under the full moon. They'd gathered in the ceremonial clearing, 12 adolescents trembling with anticipation, their parents watching with pride from the stone circle. Sarah remembered the way the moonlight felt on her skin, silver and cold, like a promise about to be kept. She remembered the way that promise broke. One by one, her peers transformed. Bones cracked and reformed. Skin sprouted fur in cascading waves of brown, gray, silver, and black. Howls of triumph echoed through the forest as young wolves celebrated their birthright. But Sarah remained human, painfully, humiliatingly human. Her father, Beta Corwin of the Silvercrest pack, had stood frozen in the crowd. His face shifted from confusion to disgust in the span of a heartbeat. Her mother, the woman who'd once braided flowers into Sarah's hair and sung her lullabies, turned away as if Sarah had already ceased to exist. Wolfless, someone whispered. The words spread like poison through the gathering. Wolfless, broken, defective. Her father didn't speak to her for 3 days. On the 4th day, he summoned her to his study, a room that smelled of pine wood and old leather, where she'd once felt safe. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "You bring shame to this bloodline," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "A Beta's daughter should be strong. You are nothing. You will leave Silvercrest by dawn. If you return, you will be treated as a rogue and hunted accordingly." Sarah had wanted to scream. She'd wanted to beg. Instead, she'd lifted her chin and said, "Yes, Father." That was 7 years ago. Now, at 23, Sarah lived on the fringes of werewolf society in a place called the Outskirts, a collection of ramshackle buildings where wolfless omegas, rogues, and half-breeds struggled to survive. The supernatural world had no place for those who didn't fit its rigid hierarchies. Here, in this forgotten corner of the realm, they made their own rules. Sarah worked 3 jobs to afford her tiny apartment above the butcher's shop. She cleaned floors at the pack hospital during the day, waited tables at a diner frequented by lower-ranking wolves at night, and took in mending on her rare off hours. Her hands were perpetually raw, her body always exhausted, but she'd learned to wear her fatigue like armor. The other omegas in the outskirts whispered about her. Ice Queen, they called her. The omega who doesn't cry. Let them whisper. Tears were a luxury she'd abandoned the night her father cast her out. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. Sarah was walking home from her hospital shift, her shoulders aching from scrubbing surgical floors, when she heard the child crying. The sound came from the alley between the abandoned textile factory and the old grain warehouse, a place even rogues avoided after dark. She should have kept walking. In the outskirts, survival meant minding your own business. But the crying was so small, so afraid. Sarah turned into the alley. The child was maybe 5 years old, a little girl with tangled dark hair and tear-stained cheeks. She was curled against the brick wall, her thin arms wrapped around her knees. When she saw Sarah, her eyes went wide with terror. "Please," the child whispered. "Please don't hurt me." Sarah's heart clenched. She crouched down slowly, making herself small and unthreatening. "I won't hurt you, sweetheart. What's your name?" Lily. Lily. That's a beautiful name." Sarah kept her voice soft and steady. "Where are your parents, Lily?" Fresh tears spilled down the child's face. "Mama got sick. She stopped breathing. And then the bad men came. They said I had to go with them, but I ran away. I've been hiding. But I'm so hungry. And it's so cold. And, shh, it's okay." Sarah reached out cautiously and brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face. The child flinched but didn't pull away. "You're safe now. Do you have anywhere to go? Any family?" Lily shook her head. "Another orphan. The outskirts was full of them, children abandoned when their Omega parents died or disappeared, left to fend for themselves because no pack would claim a wolfless child. Sarah made a decision that would alter the course of her life. "Come with me," she said gently. "I don't have much, but I have a warm bed and food. You can stay with me until we figure something out." Lily's eyes filled with hope so bright it hurt to witness. "Really? You mean it?" "I mean it." The child launched herself into Sarah's arms, clinging with desperate strength. Sarah held her close, feeling the sharp angles of Lily's ribs through her threadbare dress. When was the last time this little girl had eaten? Sarah carried Lily home, fed her soup and bread, and tucked her into the only bed, while Sarah made a nest of blankets on the floor. As she listened to Lily's breathing slow and even out into sleep, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years: purpose. For 2 weeks, Sarah cared for Lily. She used her meager savings to buy the child new clothes and proper meals. She braided Lily's hair in the mornings and told her stories at night. The little girl began to smile, to laugh, to trust. Sarah knew she couldn't keep this up forever. Her resources were stretched to breaking, but she'd figure something out. She always did. Then came the night of the blood moon. Sarah was closing up at the diner when Silas, one of the alpha enforcers from the nearby Ironpaw pack, walked in. She recognized him immediately. Everyone in the outskirts knew the enforcers. They were the wolves who kept order, who dragged rogues to justice, who served as the alpha's iron fist. Silas's eyes locked onto her, and something cold slithered down her spine. "Sarah Ashwood," he said, his voice carrying through the empty diner. "You're harboring stolen property." Her blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The child. Lily." Silas took a step forward, and Sarah saw the other enforcers filing in behind him, 5 in total, all of them radiating predatory menace. "She belongs to Madame Voss. You've been hiding her for 2 weeks. Madame Voss." The name alone made Sarah's stomach turn. Everyone knew about Voss, a cruel woman who ran a child labor ring, forcing orphaned Omegas to work in her factories for scraps of food and beatings when they failed to meet quotas. "She's a child," Sarah said, her voice shaking with fury. "Not property. She's an Omega with no pack. That makes her available for claim." Silas' smile was all teeth. "Madame Voss has legal ownership. You've broken territorial law by interfering. The punishment is exile from the outskirts, or participation in the moon trial." The moon trial. Sarah had heard whispers about it, a brutal tradition from the old days, supposedly abolished decades ago, but apparently, some packs still practiced it in secret. During a blood moon, accused wolves were brought before the Alpha King himself to face judgment. The accused would offer their throat in submission. If the king showed mercy, they lived as slaves. If not, "I'll take the trial," Sarah heard herself say. Silas's eyebrows shot up. "You understand what that means? The Alpha King doesn't show mercy to wolfless Omegas. You'll die. Then I'll die." Sarah lifted her chin. "When?" "Tomorrow night. The blood moon rises at midnight." Silas' expression shifted into something almost like respect. "You've got spine, Ashwood. Foolish, but brave. We'll collect you at dusk." After they left, Sarah allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to fall apart. Then she went home, held Lily while the child slept, and prepared to face her death. Because some things, some lives were worth dying for. Chapter 2. The Blood Moon Rises. Sarah spent her last day of freedom in careful preparation. She woke before dawn and watched Lily sleep, memorizing the peaceful curve of the child's face. The way her small fingers clutched the worn stuffed rabbit Sarah had bought from the second-hand shop. When Lily's eyes finally fluttered open, Sarah was ready with warm oatmeal and honey, the last of her supplies. But what did it matter now? "Sarah?" Lily's voice was still thick with sleep. "Are you okay? You look sad." Sarah forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I just need to go somewhere tonight. Mrs. Chen from downstairs is going to watch you for a while." Mrs. Chen was one of the few people in the outskirts. Sarah trusted a elderly Omega who'd lost her wolf in a rogue attack 30 years ago, but still possessed more kindness than most wolves Sarah had known. When Sarah had knocked on her door that morning and explained the situation, the old woman had simply nodded and pulled Sarah into a crushing embrace. "You're a fool," Mrs. Chen had whispered. A beautiful, brave fool. I'll keep the child safe, no matter what happens to you. Lily frowned, her lower lip trembling. How long will you be gone? Forever, Sarah thought. I'm not sure, she said instead. But I need you to be very brave for me. Can you do that? The little girl nodded solemnly, though tears gathered in her eyes. Will you come back? Sarah's throat tightened. She knelt down and cupped Lily's face in her hands. Listen to me, Lily. No matter what happens, I need you to know something. You are not property. You are not worthless. You are a brilliant, beautiful child who deserves to be loved and protected. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Promise me. I promise, Lily whispered. They spent the day together, their last day. Sarah took Lily to the small park at the edge of the outskirts, pushed her on the rusty swings, bought her a piece of candy from the corner store that Sarah couldn't afford. Every moment felt crystalline and precious, like holding water in cupped hands, knowing it would slip away. When dusk began to paint the sky in shades of blood and gold, Sarah walked Lily to Mrs. Chen's apartment. The little girl clung to her, crying now, somehow sensing what Sarah couldn't say aloud. I love you. Sarah whispered into Lily's hair. Never forget that. Then she gently pried the child's fingers loose and walked away, ignoring the sound of Lily's desperate sobs echoing down the hallway. Silas and his enforcers arrived exactly at sunset. They didn't bind her hands or drag her through the streets like a criminal. Instead, they formed a silent escort as they led her through the outskirts, past the boundary markers, and into Pack territory proper. Sarah had never been allowed this deep into Iron Paw lands. Despite everything, she couldn't help but notice the difference. Here, the buildings were solid and well-maintained. Street lamps actually worked, casting warm pools of light. She caught glimpses of pack wolves, real wolves with their animals intact, going about their evening routines. Families, children playing. The kind of life she'd been born to and lost. The kind of life Lily deserved. They walked for over an hour, moving deeper into pack territory until they reached the sacred grounds. An ancient clearing surrounded by standing stones carved with symbols that predated written language. The blood moon was already rising, massive and crimson against the darkening sky. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The clearing was packed with wolves. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all gathered to witness the trial. She recognized the hierarchy immediately. Alphas and high-ranking wolves near the front, lower ranks farther back, omegas clustered at the edges. All of them watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. At the center of the clearing stood a raised platform of white stone, and on that platform stood the Alpha King. Sarah had never seen him before. Few omegas ever did, but she would have known him anywhere. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame, so intense it made her skin prickle. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his body all lean muscle and predatory grace. His hair was black as midnight, his eyes a striking amber gold that seemed to glow in the moonlight. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful. Deadly. Untouchable. Alpha King Damon Blackwood, ruler of the Northern Territories, descended from a bloodline so ancient and pure that other alphas bowed before him like he was a god, and she was about to offer him her throat. Silas guided her to the base of the platform. The crowd fell silent, thousands of eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. She could feel their judgment, their disdain. Wolfless omega. Defective. Worthless. Let them think what they wanted. She wasn't here for them. The Alpha King's voice carried across the clearing, deep and commanding. State your name and your crime. Sarah lifted her chin. My name is Sarah Ashwood. I'm accused of harboring a child claimed by Madame Voss. And how do you plead? Guilty. The word rang out clear and strong. I took Lily because she was starving and terrified. I would do it again. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Alpha King's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in those golden eyes. You understand the law. Unclaimed omegas are property of those who hold their contracts. You interfered with legal ownership. I understand that your laws value property over people. Sarah shot back, and the crowd gasped. Speaking to an Alpha King with anything less than complete deference was a death sentence in itself. I understand that a 5-year-old child is being sold into slavery while hundreds of wolves stand by and do nothing. If that's justice, then I want no part of it. The silence that followed was deafening. The Alpha King descended the platform steps slowly, each movement fluid and controlled. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat of his body. Smell the wild scent of him, pine and storm, and something uniquely alpha. You speak boldly for someone about to die, he said softly. I'm already dead, Sarah replied. I've been dead since the night my pack cast me out for being wolfless. The only question is whether I die as a coward or someone who stood for something. His eyes narrowed. You're wolfless? Yes. Then how did you think you could win a moon trial? These trials are won through strength. You have none. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I didn't come here to win. I came here to buy time for a child to escape Madame Voss's reach. As long as I'm on trial, Lily is protected under territorial law. Mrs. Chen will have gotten her to the sanctuary across the border by now. So you see, Alpha King, I've already won. For the first time, genuine surprise crossed his features. Then something else, something that might have been respect in a different context, from a different man. Clever, he murmured. Stupid, but clever. He raised his voice so the crowd could hear. The traditional moon trial requires the accused to offer their throat in submission. If I find them worthy, I grant mercy. If not. He let the implication hang. Sarah's hands were shaking, but she forced them to stillness. I understand. Then kneel. She knelt. The Alpha King circled her slowly, a predator assessing prey. The crowd watched in breathless silence. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel the blood moon's light on her skin like a physical weight. Offer your throat, the Alpha King commanded. This was it. The moment everything ended, Sarah tilted her head back, exposing the vulnerable column of her throat. The most submissive position a wolf could take, an absolute display of surrender. She felt his presence behind her, felt his breath ghost across her skin. Any last words? He asked quietly. Just one question, Sarah whispered. Was she worth it? The child you saved by killing me, was she worth this price? His hand touched her shoulder, and she felt claws extend, not fully shifted, but enough to tear flesh, enough to kill. Her name is Lily, Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the terror flooding her veins. She likes strawberries and stories about brave knights. She's afraid of the dark but pretends not to be. She deserves a life. That's all I wanted. That's why I'm here. The claws pressed against her throat. Sarah closed her eyes and waited for death. But death didn't come. Instead, she felt heat searing, overwhelming heat that burned through her veins like liquid fire. The Alpha King's teeth sank into the junction of her neck and shoulder, and Sarah screamed as agony exploded through every nerve ending. Not a killing bite, a claiming mark. The crowd erupted into chaos. Wolves were shouting, roaring, some in outrage, others in shock. Sarah couldn't process any of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the impossible sensation of the Alpha King's mark burning itself into her soul. When he finally released her, she collapsed forward, gasping. His hand caught her before she hit the ground. What? She choked out. What did you? The Alpha King pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, his arm supporting her weight. His eyes blazed gold, his wolf clearly visible just beneath the surface. I claim her, he announced to the stunned crowd, his voice carrying absolute authority. Sarah Ashwood is now under my protection. She is marked as my mate. Anyone who harms her answers to me. Mate. The word didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. I don't understand, Sarah whispered, her vision swimming. The Alpha King looked down at her, and for just a moment, something achingly vulnerable flickered across his face. Neither do I, he said quietly. But my wolf knows what it wants, and it wants you. Then Sarah's world went dark. Chapter 3. The Claiming. Sarah woke to silk sheets and the scent of cedar. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was dreaming. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft, nothing like the thin mattress in her apartment above the butcher's shop. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Then the mark on her neck pulsed with heat, and everything came crashing back. The trial, the Alpha King, the bite. Sarah shot upright, her hand flying to her shoulder. Her fingers found raised skin, the unmistakable pattern of a mate mark. Still fresh, still burning with supernatural energy that made her dizzy. This couldn't be real. The door opened, and a woman entered, carrying a silver tray. She was elegant and poised, her dark hair swept into an intricate bun, her dress tailored and expensive. An Omega, Sarah realized, but one who carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never known rejection. "You're awake," the woman said, her tone neutral. "I'm Eleanor, the king's head attendant. I've brought breakfast." Sarah stared at the tray, fresh fruit, warm bread, honey, tea that smelled like jasmine. More food than she'd typically eat in 3 days. "Where am I?" "The Northern Palace, the king's private wing." Eleanor set the tray on the bedside table with practiced efficiency. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. The claiming mark took longer than expected to settle. 18 hours. Panic flared in Sarah's chest. "Lily, the little girl, is she safe?" Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "The king sent enforcers to ensure her safe passage to the sanctuary. She's with your Mrs. Chen, well-fed and protected. The king also paid off her contract with Madame Voss. The child is free." The relief was so intense it hurt. Sarah's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. Thank the king." Eleanor moved to the wardrobe and began pulling out dresses. "You'll need to dress. The king requests your presence in his study within the hour." "I don't understand any of this." Sarah's voice cracked. "Why did he mark me? I'm wolfless. I'm nobody. Alphas don't claim omegas like me." Eleanor paused, her back still turned. When she spoke, her voice was carefully measured. "The king doesn't explain his decisions to his staff, but I will tell you this. In the 300 years of Blackwood rule, no alpha king has ever claimed a mate at a moon trial. What happened last night? It broke centuries of tradition." "Then why?" "That," Eleanor interrupted gently, "is a question only the king can answer." An hour later, Sarah stood outside the king's study, wearing a dress that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. It was deep emerald green, simple but exquisitely tailored, and it made her feel like an imposter playing dress-up in someone else's clothes. She raised her hand to knock, but the door swung open before her knuckles connected with wood. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, and Sarah's breath caught. In the moonlight of the trial, he'd been terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. Here, in the warm afternoon light, he was human. Almost. He'd traded his ceremonial robes for simple black clothing, and his midnight hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. But those amber gold eyes were the same, intense and unsettling, like they could see straight through her skin to the secrets beneath. "Come in," he said. The study was warm and lived in, lined with books and maps. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. Nothing about this room felt like the cold palace of an all-powerful Alpha King. It felt like a sanctuary. "Sit." The king gestured to one of the leather chairs by the fire. Sarah sat, keeping her spine straight and her hands folded. The mark on her neck throbbed with awareness of his proximity. The king remained standing, his gaze fixed on her face. The silence stretched between them, taut and uncomfortable. "You're angry," he said finally. "I'm confused," Sarah corrected. "You were supposed to kill me. That's what the moon trial is for. That's what every wolf in that clearing expected. Instead, you marked me as your mate, and I don't understand why." "Neither do I." The honesty in those 3 words startled her. The king turned to face the fire, his profile sharp in the flickering light. "I've presided over 12 moon trials in my lifetime. Every single one ended the same way, with mercy or death, depending on the crime. It's a ritual, predictable, safe." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "But when you tilted your head back and offered your throat, when you spoke about that child like she mattered more than your own life, my wolf went insane." Sarah's heart hammered. "Your wolf?" The animal inside every shifter, the primal instinct we spend our lives learning to control. He looked at her then, and the raw vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. "My wolf wanted you, needed you. It was so overwhelming I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. All I knew was that if I killed you, I'd be destroying something precious. Something mine. But I'm wolfless, Sarah whispered. I'm broken. You're not broken. The words came out fierce, almost angry. You're the bravest person who stood in that clearing. Do you understand what you did? You walked into certain death to save a child who wasn't even yours. You challenged me, the Alpha King, in front of thousands of witnesses. You didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't cry. You offered your life like it was a fair trade for one small girl's freedom. Sarah's throat tightened. She deserved better than Madame Voss. Most people would have agreed and done nothing. You acted. The king crossed the distance between them and knelt before her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. The gesture was so unexpected, so humble, that Sarah forgot to breathe. You're not broken, Sarah Ashwood. You're extraordinary. My wolf recognized it even if I was too blind to see it at first. His hand reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched the mark on her neck with gentle fingers. Heat bloomed beneath his touch, and Sarah gasped. I marked you, he said quietly, because in that moment, my wolf claimed you as mate, and I couldn't deny it, didn't want to. His eyes met hers. But I need you to understand something. A claiming mark creates a bond, but it doesn't trap you. If you truly want to leave, if you can't bear being tied to me, I'll find a way to break it. I won't keep you prisoner. Sarah stared at him. This powerful, terrifying Alpha King was kneeling before her, offering her freedom, offering her a choice. No one had given her a choice in 7 years. What would happen if the bond broke? She asked. Pain flickered across his face. It would be excruciating for both of us. The wolf bond isn't meant to be severed, but I'd survive, and you'd be free to live your life however you choose. And Lily? Protected. Regardless of your decision, I gave you my word, and I keep my promises. Sarah's mind spun. Part of her wanted to run, to reject this impossible situation and return to the simple, painful life she understood. But another part, a part she barely recognized, whispered, Stay. See what this could become. I don't love you, she said bluntly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I don't love you either. Not yet. But my wolf chose you for a reason. Maybe we could try to understand why. No pressure, no expectations, just time. Time to what? Get to know each other, learn if this bond means something beyond animal instinct. He stood, offering her his hand. I'm Damon, by the way. Not the king or Alpha, just Damon. Sarah looked at his outstretched hand. This was the moment, the choice. She could refuse. She could walk away, or she could leap into the unknown. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. I'm Sarah, she said. Just Sarah. Just Sarah, Damon repeated, and his smile was genuine this time. I think that's exactly who you're meant to be. The next 3 days passed in a blur of overwhelming strangeness. Damon was patient, more patient than Sarah had imagined an Alpha King could be. He didn't push her to share his bed. Instead, she had her own suite of rooms, luxurious beyond anything she'd dreamed, with Eleanor checking on her regularly to ensure she had everything she needed. Damon invited her to dine with him each evening, and they talked. Actually talked, like two people trying to understand a language neither had spoken before. She learned that he'd become king at 19, when his father died in a rogue attack. That he'd spent the last 15 years building alliances and strengthening pack laws. That he loved books and hated formal ceremonies, and sometimes felt crushed by the weight of his responsibilities. He learned that she'd been studying healing before her exile, that she missed her mother even though the woman had abandoned her, that she had nightmares about the night she couldn't shift. Do you resent them? Damon asked one evening over dinner. Your family? Sarah considered the question. I did. For years I was so angry I could barely see straight. But anger is exhausting. Eventually, I just let it go. They made their choice. I made mine. To survive. To live, she corrected. There's a difference. Something shifted in his expression, respect, mixed with something deeper, something almost like awe. On the fourth morning, Sarah woke to shouting in the hallways. She threw on a robe and opened her door to find the palace in chaos. Servants rushed past, their faces pale with fear. Eleanor appeared, her usual composure cracked. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded. "The council," Eleanor said breathlessly. "They've called an emergency session. They're demanding the king annul the mate bond." Ice flooded Sarah's veins. "Why?" Eleanor's expression was grim. "Because you're wolfless. They're calling it an abomination. They say a king can't have a defective Omega as his queen. If you're still watching, hit subscribe. Because Sarah deserves witnesses who won't turn away. When the powerful try to crush the defenseless, drop a comment and tell Sarah she's not alone in this fight." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Abomination. Defective. The same words that had haunted her for 7 years, now wielded as weapons against the one person who'd chosen her. "Where is Damon?" Sarah asked, her voice deadly calm. "In the throne room." "But Sarah, you can't." Sarah was already running. Chapter 4. The Council's Judgment. The throne room was a cathedral of power. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, held aloft by marble columns carved with wolves mid-hunt. Stained glass windows depicted the history of the Blackwood Line conquests and coronations, rendered in jewel-toned light. At the far end, elevated on a dais of black stone, sat the throne itself, ancient wood and iron forged in an age when magic still walked freely through the world. And surrounding that throne were 12 of the most powerful alphas Sarah had ever seen. The council. They stood in a semicircle, their combined dominance pressing against her like a physical weight. Sarah's knees threatened to buckle, but she forced herself forward. Every eye in the room turned to watch her approach. Servants pressed against the walls, guards at attention, and Damon himself, seated on his throne with an expression carved from ice. "Sarah," his voice carried a warning. "You shouldn't be here. I know." She stopped at the base of the dais, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. "But they're talking about me. I deserve to be present." One of the council members stepped forward, a silver-haired alpha with cold blue eyes and a face like weathered granite. "The Omega speaks out of turn. She hasn't been given permission to address this assembly." "The Omega has a name," Sarah shot back. "And I'll speak when spoken about, permission or not." Shocked silence rippled through the room. The silver-haired alpha's face darkened with rage. "You dare." "Enough, Counselor Thane." Damon's voice cracked like a whip. "She stays. Continue your argument, and she'll hear it." Thane's jaw clenched, but he inclined his head in grudging obedience. When he spoke again, his words were measured and deliberate. "Very well, as I was saying before this." Interruption. "The council finds the king's claiming of this Omega to be unlawful and dangerous. The mate bond must be dissolved immediately." "On what grounds?" Damon asked, his tone deceptively mild. "On the grounds that she is wolfless." Another council member spoke, a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. "Our laws are explicit, Your Majesty. The Queen must be capable of shifting. She must be able to produce strong heirs to continue the Blackwood line. This Omega can do neither. The law states the Queen must be of strong bloodline and sound character," Damon countered. "It says nothing about shifting ability." "Because it was assumed." Thane slammed his fist on the armrest of his chair. "No Alpha King in history has ever needed that clause spelled out, because no Alpha King has ever been foolish enough to claim a defective mate." The word echoed through the throne room. Defective. Sarah's hands curled into fists, nails biting into her palms. "Watch your tongue, Counselor," Damon said softly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You're speaking about my mate. We're speaking about a mistake." A third counselor stepped forward, younger than the others, with auburn hair and a politician's smile. "Your Majesty, we understand the appeal. The Omega is pretty enough, I suppose, and her defiance at the moon trial was certainly entertaining. But sentiment cannot govern the realm. You need a strong queen, someone who can stand at your side as an equal, not a liability you must constantly protect." "Sarah is stronger than any of you realize," Damon said. "Strength isn't measured in pretty words and foolish sacrifice." Thane snapped. It's measured in power, in the ability to shift, to fight, to defend the pack when necessary. What happens when rogues attack the palace? When enemies target the queen, she cannot even access her wolf. She would be slaughtered within minutes. Then I'll protect her. You cannot be everywhere at once. The female counselor's voice rose with frustration. Your Majesty, please. We're not asking you to kill the girl. Simply dissolve the bond. Find her a comfortable place to live in the territories. Provide her with resources, and choose a proper mate, one worthy of your station. Sarah had heard enough. May I speak? She asked, her voice cutting through the argument. The council turned to stare at her with varying degrees of disdain. The Omega wishes to embarrass herself further, Thane muttered. By all means, let her speak. Sarah looked directly at Damon. His amber eyes were unreadable, but she saw tension in the line of his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the throne's armrests. I agree with the council, she said. The room erupted. Damon's expression cracked, shock, and something that looked like pain flashing across his features. Sarah, let me finish. She turned to face the council, lifting her chin. You're right. I am wolfless. I cannot shift, cannot fight like you fight, cannot provide the kind of strength you value. By every measure your society uses to judge worth, I am defective. Thane smiled, victorious. Finally, the Omega sees reason. But, Sarah continued, her voice rising, your measures are broken. The smile vanished. You value strength, Sarah said, her words ringing clear and strong. But only one kind, the ability to shift, to dominate, to enforce your will through violence. You've built an entire civilization on that single definition, and anyone who doesn't fit gets discarded. Cast out. Treated like garbage. She took a step forward, and several counselors actually retreated. I've spent 7 years in the outskirts. I've seen children starving because no pack will claim a wolfless Omega. I've watched elders die alone because they lost their wolves to injury or age. I've held the hands of broken people who were told their entire lives that they were worthless because they couldn't shift. Her voice shook with rage. And you know what I learned? That your definition of strength is a lie. How dare you, the female counselor began. How dare I? Sarah laughed bitterly. How dare you? You sit in your marble palace and make laws that condemn thousands to suffering, and you call it justice. You throw away people like they're broken tools, and you call it strength. But real strength, the kind that actually matters, isn't about claws and fangs. It's about getting up every morning when you have nothing. It's about protecting those weaker than yourself even when no one will protect you. It's about choosing kindness in a world that rewards cruelty. She turned back to Damon, and her voice softened. You asked me 3 days ago if I resented my family for casting me out. I said I let it go, but that was only half true. The truth is, being exiled taught me something your council will never understand. That worth isn't something other people can give or take away. It's something you claim for yourself. Damon was staring at her like she'd hung the moon. So yes, Sarah continued, I'm wolfless. I'm an Omega. I'm everything your council says I shouldn't be. But I survived 7 years of hell with my dignity intact. I risked my life to save a child I barely knew, and I'm standing in front of the most powerful alphas in the realm telling them their system is broken. She smiled, and it was fierce and proud. If that's not strength, counselors, then I don't know what is. Silence. Then Damon stood. He descended the dais in 3 long strides, and stopped directly in front of her. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. You're magnificent, he said quietly. Then he turned to face the council, and his expression transformed into something terrible and absolute. The mate bond stands, he declared, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. Sarah Ashwood is my chosen queen. Any counselor who cannot accept this is free to resign their position effective immediately. Thane's face purpled with rage. Your Majesty, you're making a catastrophic mistake. No. Damon's wolf flashed in his eyes, turning them pure molten gold. The catastrophic mistake was building a society that measures worth by shifting ability alone. Sarah is right. Our system is broken, and it's been broken for generations. We've thrown away countless people who could have contributed to our packs simply because they didn't fit our narrow definition of strength. He moved to stand beside Sarah, his hand finding hers and lacing their fingers together. Things are going to change, Damon continued, starting with the laws regarding wolfless omegas. No longer will they be considered property or second-class citizens. They will have the same rights and protections as any other pack member. You cannot rewrite centuries of law on a whim, the female counselor protested. I'm not acting on a whim. I'm acting on principle. Damon's gaze swept across each council member. My mate has shown me something I was too blind to see, that we've been measuring the wrong things. Intelligence, courage, compassion, resilience, these matter more than the ability to grow claws. And if you cannot see that, then perhaps you're not fit to advise me. Thane took a menacing step forward. You would dissolve this council over a wolfless omega? I would rebuild this entire realm if necessary. Damon's voice was soft but absolute. The mate bond stands. Sarah will be queen, and the laws will change. Those are not requests. Those are commands from your alpha king. The tension in the room was suffocating. Sarah could see the calculation in the counselors' eyes, weighing their options, measuring their power against Damon's, wondering if they could actually challenge him. Finally, Thane bowed his head. As you command, Your Majesty. The others followed suit, though their expressions ranged from furious to resigned. Good. Damon's hand tightened around Sarah's. This meeting is adjourned. Get out. The counselors filed out, throwing dark looks over their shoulders. When the throne room finally emptied, leaving only guards stationed at a respectful distance, Damon turned to Sarah. You shouldn't have agreed with them, he said, but there was no anger in his voice. I thought for a moment. I thought you wanted the bond broken. I needed them to listen, Sarah replied. If I'd defended myself immediately, they would have dismissed everything I said as an omega trying to hold on to power. But when I agreed with them first, when I acknowledged their concerns, they had to actually hear my argument. Damon stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. My wolf chose better than I knew, he said. You're not just brave, Sarah. You're brilliant. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. I just said what needed saying. No, you challenged centuries of prejudice in front of the most powerful alphas in the realm, and you won. He pulled her closer, until they were almost touching. That's not just anything. That's extraordinary. The mark on Sarah's neck pulsed with warmth, and she felt the bond between them strengthen, not just the magical tether the claiming had created, but something deeper, something real. They're going to hate me, she said quietly. The council. They'll never accept me. Then they'll learn to live with disappointment. Damon's hand moved to cup the back of her neck, his thumb brushing over the mate mark. I meant what I said, Sarah. I'll rebuild this entire realm if I have to. Starting with protecting you. I don't need protection, Sarah whispered. I need a partner. His eyes darkened with something that made her breath catch. Then that's what you'll have. Partners. Equals. In everything. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, his lips brushed against hers, soft and questioning and full of promise. The kiss was nothing like Sarah had imagined. It wasn't demanding or aggressive. It was gentle, almost reverent, like he was afraid she might shatter. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damon rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, he said. For what? For being exactly who you are, for refusing to break, for showing me what real strength looks like. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I don't deserve you, Sarah Ashwood, but I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway. Sarah smiled, a real, genuine smile that felt strange on her face after so many years of carefully controlled expressions. Good, she said, because I'm not going anywhere. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Palace. The attempted poisoning came 3 days later. Sarah woke in the middle of the night to agony twisting through her stomach. She barely made it to the bathroom before she was violently sick, her body rejecting something it recognized as poison. She collapsed against the cold tile floor, shaking and sweating, trying to call for help but unable to force words past her constricted throat. That's when she felt it, the bond flaring to life like a beacon. Damon burst through her bedroom door less than a minute later, his eyes wild with panic. He found her on the bathroom floor and dropped to his knees beside her, hands hovering as if afraid to touch and cause more pain. "Sarah, gods, Sarah, what happened?" She managed to gasp. "Before bed. Eleanor brought." She couldn't finish. Another wave of nausea hit, and Damon held her hair back while she retched, his other hand rubbing soothing circles on her back. When the worst passed, he lifted her as if she weighed nothing and carried her back to bed. "Guards." His voice cracked like thunder. "Get the healer. Now." Within minutes, the room flooded with people. The palace healer, a stern-faced woman named Margot, examined Sarah with practiced efficiency while Damon paced like a caged animal, his wolf clearly riding close to the surface. "Nightshade," Margot announced grimly, holding up a vial of viscous liquid, mixed with something to mask the taste. "She's lucky, her body started rejecting it before the poison could fully enter her bloodstream. Any longer and—" She didn't need to finish that sentence. Damon's hands were shaking. Sarah had never seen him like this, the composed, controlled Alpha King completely undone. "Who?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Who brought her the tea?" A guard stepped forward, his face pale. "Eleanor, Your Majesty." She delivered the tea tray personally at 9 o'clock, as she does every evening. "Bring her to me." "Your Majesty, she's gone. Her quarters are empty." It appears she fled sometime after delivering the tray. The temperature in the room plummeted. Sarah felt Damon's rage through the bond, a black, consuming thing that threatened to swallow everything in its path. "Find her," Damon growled. "Search every inch of this palace, every building in the territory. I want her found and brought to me alive. She doesn't get the mercy of a quick death." The guards scattered. Margot finished administering an antidote and left detailed instructions for Sarah's care. As soon as the room emptied, Damon returned to Sarah's bedside and took her hand with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence still simmering in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "This is my fault. I should have known, should have protected you better." "You couldn't have known Eleanor would." Sarah stopped, frowning. Why would she do this? She seemed kind, almost maternal, because someone bought her loyalty. Damon's jaw clenched. "Eleanor has served the palace for 15 years. She was trusted, well-paid, respected. The only reason she'd risk everything is if someone offered her something more valuable than her position." "The council," Sarah whispered. "Most likely." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "But we'll find out. And when we do, there will be consequences." Eleanor was found 3 hours later, attempting to cross the southern border. Damon had her brought to the throne room in chains. Sarah insisted on being present, despite still feeling weak and shaky. She needed to see this, needed to understand why someone she'd begun to trust had tried to kill her. Eleanor knelt on the marble floor, her elegant composure completely shattered. Her hair hung in tangled strands around her tear-streaked face, and her hands trembled where they were bound behind her back. Damon stood before his throne, rather than sitting on it, his posture radiating barely controlled fury. "Explain," he commanded. "And choose your words carefully. They're the only thing standing between you and a very painful death." Eleanor's voice shook. They said she was dangerous, that she would destroy everything you've built, that the realm would fall into chaos with a wolfless queen." "Who said this?" "I can't. They'll kill my family. My daughter, my granddaughter. I'll kill your family if you don't speak." Damon's voice was ice. "And I'll make you watch. Talk." The cruelty of the threat made Sarah flinch, but she understood it. This was the Alpha King, the man who'd ruled for 15 years through strength and fear when necessary. This was the side of him she'd been shielded from. Eleanor sobbed. "Counselor Thane. He approached me 2 weeks ago, before the moon trial. He said changes were coming. Dangerous changes. He said if I truly loved the realm, I would help prevent disaster. By murdering an innocent woman. By removing a threat." Eleanor's head snapped up, and Sarah saw genuine conviction burning in her eyes. "Your Majesty, please. I've served your family my entire adult life. I've watched you grow from a boy into a king. Everything I did was to protect you, to protect the realm from From what? Damon's voice could have cut glass. From a woman who's done nothing but show courage and compassion? From someone who risked her life to save a child? What exactly makes her a threat, Eleanor? She's changing you. The words burst out of Eleanor like a confession. Before her you were focused, determined, untouchable. You made decisions based on logic and strength, but now you're talking about rewriting laws, challenging the council, weakening centuries of tradition, all for an Omega who can't even shift. Don't you see? She's making you soft, making you weak. Silence fell across the throne room. Sarah felt something break inside her chest. This was it, the fundamental divide. Eleanor and the others like her truly believed that compassion was weakness, that mercy was a flaw, that anyone who challenged their brutal hierarchy needed to be eliminated. Damon descended from the dais slowly. When he spoke, his voice was conversational, almost friendly. It was more terrifying than his rage had been. You're right about one thing, Eleanor. Sarah has changed me. She's made me question systems I took for granted. She's shown me that strength comes in forms I never recognized. He stopped directly in front of the kneeling woman. But you're wrong about the most important thing. She hasn't made me weak. She's made me dangerous. He turned to the guards. Take her to the cells. She'll stand trial for attempted murder and conspiracy. If Councillor Thane is involved, we'll find proof. As the guards dragged Eleanor away, still sobbing, Damon returned to Sarah's side. His hand found hers, and she felt the tremor running through him, adrenaline and rage and fear all tangled together. We need to leave the palace, he said quietly. It's not safe here. Where would we go? The northern estate. It's remote, easily defensible, and staffed by people I trust implicitly. His amber eyes searched her face. I won't let them hurt you again, Sarah. Whatever it takes. They left before dawn. Damon kept the departure quiet, taking only a small group of guards he personally trusted. Sarah watched the palace disappear behind them as their carriage rolled through the gates, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving one danger for another. The northern estate sat at the edge of Blackwood territory, nestled in a valley surrounded by ancient pine forests. It was smaller than the palace, but no less beautiful, all stone and timber, built to withstand harsh winters and harsher times. Inside, a skeleton staff waited. Damon had sent word ahead, and they'd prepared rooms in the main house. But as Sarah explored the estate over the next few days, she noticed something strange. People were afraid of her. The servants wouldn't meet her eyes. They performed their duties efficiently but kept their distance, speaking only when directly addressed. Even the guards seemed nervous in her presence. On the third day, Sarah finally confronted one of the maids, a young woman named Iris who'd been assigned to help her dress. Why are you all so afraid of me? Sarah asked bluntly. Iris's hands stilled on the laces of Sarah's dress. My lady, I don't. Please, just be honest. The girl's shoulders slumped. People are saying you're cursed. That you're the reason the king is fighting with the council. That you're bringing darkness to the realm. Because I'm wolfless. Because you're different. Iris's voice dropped to a whisper. And because bad things happen to people who get close to you. The healer who examined you after the poisoning, her daughter fell ill 2 days later. One of the guards who escorted you here? His horse went lame and had to be put down. They're saying you carry misfortune. Sarah's blood ran cold. Those are coincidences. Maybe. Iris didn't sound convinced. But people are scared. And scared people believe what they want to believe. After Iris left, Sarah stood at the window and stared out at the forest. Cursed. They thought she was cursed. It was almost funny she'd survived 7 years of hell, only to become the monster in someone else's story. The door opened behind her, and she felt Damon's presence before he spoke. You heard about the rumors, he said. It wasn't a question. How long have you known? Since yesterday. I wanted to address it myself before telling you. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. They're wrong, Sarah. You're not cursed. But they believe I am. And belief is a powerful thing. Then we'll change what they believe. His hold tightened. I won't let them turn you into a villain. Sarah leaned back against his chest, drawing strength from his certainty. But deep down, she couldn't shake the fear that maybe, just maybe, Eleanor had been right about one thing. Maybe she was dangerous after all. The attack came on the 7th night. Sarah woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of screaming. She stumbled out of bed, still groggy with sleep, and threw open her bedroom door. The hallway was filled with acrid gray smoke that burned her lungs and stung her eyes. "Damon!" she screamed. His door burst open 3 rooms down, and he emerged half-dressed, his eyes blazing gold with his wolf. "Get out! The house is on fire." They ran through smoke-filled corridors. Damon's hand locked around her wrist. Flames licked up the walls, spreading with unnatural speed. This wasn't an accident. Someone had set this fire deliberately, and they'd used something to make it spread faster. They burst out the front entrance and into chaos. The entire estate was under attack. Rogues, at least 24 of them, swarmed the grounds, fighting Damon's guards with vicious efficiency. Sarah saw bodies on the ground, both wolf and human, blood dark against the moonlit grass. "Stay behind me," Damon commanded, his voice already roughened by his wolf. But the rogues had seen them. 3 broke away from the main fight and charged directly toward Sarah, clearly recognizing her as the target. Damon shifted in an explosion of power, bones cracking and reforming in seconds. His wolf was massive and midnight black, easily twice the size of a normal wolf. He intercepted the first rogue with brutal efficiency, his jaws closing around its throat and shaking once, viciously. The rogue dropped, dead before it hit the ground. The other 2 hesitated, then split up, one engaging Damon, while the other continued toward Sarah. She ran. She hated herself for it, but she ran. Because what else could a wolfless Omega do against a creature built to kill? She sprinted toward the tree line, branches whipping at her face, roots trying to trip her. Behind her, she heard snarling and the wet sound of tearing flesh. Then she heard the second set of paws gaining on her. Sarah's foot caught on a root, and she went down hard, palms scraping against rough bark. She rolled onto her back just as the rogue leaped, jaws open wide, aiming for her throat. A gray blur slammed into the rogue midair, knocking it aside. 2 wolves tumbled across the forest floor in a mass of teeth and claws. Sarah scrambled backward, heart hammering, trying to see which wolf was winning. The gray wolf, one of Damon's guards, she realized managed to pin the rogue and deliver a killing blow. Then it turned to her, blood dripping from its muzzle, and she saw intelligence in its eyes. Recognition. The wolf shifted, bones cracking back into human form. It was Silas, the enforcer, who'd arrested her for the moon trial. He was naked and covered in blood, but his expression was grim and determined. "My lady," he said, breathing hard. "We need to get you somewhere safe. Damon, the king can handle himself. You're the target. They want you dead." Before Sarah could respond, something massive and black burst through the trees. Damon in wolf form, his fur matted with blood that wasn't his own. He shifted immediately, his eyes wild and frantic until they landed on Sarah. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No. Silas saved me." Damon's gaze flicked to the enforcer, and something passed between them, understanding and respect. "Thank you." "My duty, Your Majesty." Silas gestured back toward the estate. "The rogues are retreating. We've killed 8 and captured 2 alive, but the house is lost." They turned to look at the estate. Flames engulfed the entire structure, turning the night sky orange and red. Sarah watched years of history burn, watched servants weeping as they clutched what few possessions they'd managed to save, and felt guilt crush down on her like a physical weight. This was because of her. All of it. If Sarah's world is burning and you're still here, subscribe because someone needs to witness what happens when they try to break an unbreakable spirit. Comment. Tell me what you'd do if your very existence put everyone you cared about in danger. Damon's hand found hers in the darkness. "This isn't your fault. How can you say that?" Sarah's voice broke. "They're targeting me. Eleanor tried to poison me. Someone started rumors to isolate me. And now rogues attacked specifically to kill me. Everyone around me is in danger, Damon. Everyone who helps me gets hurt. Then we stop running." His voice was hard as iron. "We stop reacting to their attacks and start hunting them instead. Someone is orchestrating this, someone with resources and inside knowledge, And tomorrow, we're going to find out who." He pulled her close, and Sarah buried her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, smoke and blood, and something uniquely him that made her wolfless heart ache with longing. "I won't let them win," Damon whispered into her hair. "I won't let them take you from me." But as Sarah stood in the ashes of what was supposed to be their sanctuary, watching flames consume everything in their path, she couldn't shake the terrible certainty that some battles couldn't be won, and some prices were too high to pay. Chapter 6. The Interrogation. The captured rogues were chained in silver in the old stone cellar beneath the guard barracks, one of the few structures that had survived the fire intact. Sarah insisted on being present for the interrogation, despite Damon's protests. She needed to understand who wanted her dead badly enough to burn down an entire estate. She needed to look into the eyes of the people trying to destroy her. The cellar was cold and damp, lit by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows across rough stone walls. The two rogues hung from chains bolted into the ceiling, their wrists raw and bleeding where the silver burned their skin. Both were male, one older with graying hair and scars that spoke of a hard life, the other barely more than a boy. Damon stood before them, his expression carved from ice. Silas flanked him on one side, another trusted guard named Kira on the other. Sarah hung back near the entrance, trying to make herself invisible while still being able to see and hear everything. "Names," Damon commanded. The older rogue spat at his feet. "Go to hell, King." Damon's hand shot out faster than Sarah could track, grabbing the rogue by the throat and slamming him back against the stone wall. The chains rattled violently. "I'll ask once more. Names?" "Garrett," the rogue choked out. "Just Garrett." Damon released him and turned to the younger one, who looked terrified. "And you?" "T. Thomas, Your Majesty." "Good. Thomas seems to have manners." Damon's voice was deceptively mild. "Now, who hired you to attack my estate?" "We don't know," Garrett rasped, still catching his breath. "We were contacted through an intermediary. Never saw the client's face, never heard a name. That's how these jobs work. But you knew the target." Garrett's eyes flicked to Sarah, and she saw pure hatred burning there. "The wolfless Omega." "Yeah, we knew. Everyone knows about the King's abomination, mate." Damon's fist connected with Garrett's jaw with a crack that made Sarah wince. Blood sprayed across the stone floor. "Careful," Damon said softly. "That's my queen you're insulting." "She's not a queen." Garrett spat blood. "She's a curse, a disease. The realm would be better off if—" Another blow, this one harder. Garrett's head snapped to the side, and he sagged in his chains, semi-conscious. Damon turned to Thomas, who was trembling so hard his chains rattled continuously. "You seem smarter than your friend. Tell me what I want to know, and your death will be quick. Lie to me, and I'll make it last days." I don't know much," Thomas stammered. "We were told to kill the Omega at any cost. We were given wolfsbane to coat our claws, told it would work even if she didn't have a wolf. And we were paid half up front, with the rest promised after. After the job was done." "How much?" 5,000 gold pieces. Each. Sarah's breath caught. That was a fortune, more money than most rogues would see in a lifetime. Someone was willing to pay an obscene amount to see her dead. "The intermediary," Damon pressed. "Describe them." "Hooded. Masked." "But—" Thomas hesitated, fear warring with the desperate hope of leniency. "But I heard an accent. Northern Territories, but educated. Not common pack. Someone high-ranking. Man or woman. Could have been either." The voice was disguised, but I got the sense it was a woman. Something about the way she moved. Damon exchanged a look with Silas. "A female council member? Or someone working for one?" Silas said grimly. "Councillor Vera has connections throughout the Northern Territories, and she was one of the most vocal opponents of the mate bond." Damon turned back to the rogues. "Anything else? Any detail, no matter how small?" Thomas shook his head miserably. "That's all I know. I swear it on my mother's grave." "What about the fire?" Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the cellar. Both rogues' heads snapped toward her. "The way it spread, that wasn't natural. Someone used accelerants. Who provided them? Thomas blinked in surprise. The intermediary. She gave us vials of something she called dragon's breath, said to pour it along the foundation before we attacked. It was supposed to spread fast and hot enough that no one could escape. But they had escaped. Barely. If Sarah had been sleeping more deeply, if the smoke hadn't woken her in time. Enough, Damon said. Take them back to the cells. They'll stand trial at dawn. As Silas and Kira led the rogues away, Sarah remained in the cellar, staring at the bloodstains on the stone floor. She felt numb, hollowed out by the confirmation that someone, likely someone in the council, wanted her dead so badly they'd hired assassins and provided them with magical fire. Sarah. Damon's voice was gentle as he approached her. You shouldn't have heard all that. I needed to. She looked up at him, this powerful king who'd claimed her as his mate, and felt the weight of what her presence in his life had cost. 10,000 gold pieces. That's what my death is worth to them. And they'll keep trying. Keep hiring assassins. Keep burning down your properties. Keep hurting people who get close to me. Then we'll keep stopping them. For how long? Her voice cracked. Until someone succeeds? Until you get killed protecting me? Until everyone who cares about me ends up dead or broken? Damon's hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. They're attacking you because they're afraid. Because you represent change they can't control. Because every day you survive as my mate proves that their entire worldview is built on lies. Or maybe they're right, Sarah whispered. Maybe I am cursed. Maybe I am bringing darkness to the realm. No, the word was absolute. You're bringing light, truth. The kind of strength that terrifies people who've built their power on cruelty and oppression. His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I won't let them break you, Sarah. And I won't let you break yourself. She wanted to believe him. Gods, how she wanted to believe him. But as they climbed back up the cellar stairs into the smoke-scented dawn, Sarah couldn't shake the terrible certainty that this was only the beginning. The trial of Garrett and Thomas took place in the burned ruins of the estate. Damon had insisted on holding it there, in full view of what the rogues' attack had destroyed. The remaining guards and servants gathered as witnesses, their faces grim in the morning light. The trial itself was swift. The rogues confessed to their crimes. They had no choice, with so many witnesses to their attack. Damon pronounced sentence without hesitation. Death by execution, to be carried out immediately. Sarah watched from beside the makeshift platform as Silas and Kira led the rogues to the execution posts. She'd never witnessed an execution before, and part of her wanted to look away. But another part, the part that had survived 7 years in the outskirts, knew she needed to see this. Needed to understand the full cost of survival. Thomas was crying, begging for mercy that wouldn't come. Garrett remained defiant to the end, his eyes locked on Sarah with unfiltered hatred. Curse you, he spat, as the guards secured him to the post. Curse you and everyone who stands with you. The realm will burn before it accepts an abomination as queen. The words echoed in Sarah's mind as Damon gave the order. 2 arrows, silver-tipped and deadly. 2 bodies slumping in their bonds. Justice, by the laws of the realm. But Sarah felt no satisfaction. Only a hollow ache and the certainty that 2 more deaths had been added to the tally of her existence. After the bodies were removed and the crowd dispersed, Sarah walked through the ruins of the estate alone. The main house was nothing but blackened timber and collapsed stone. The gardens, where she'd begun to find peace, were charred and destroyed. Everything, all of it, reduced to ash. She found herself in what had been the library. Books lay scattered and burned, their pages crumbling to dust at the slightest touch. She knelt among the wreckage and picked up the remnant of what looked like a journal. Its leather cover scorched but still intact. The first page was readable. This house was built as a sanctuary. May all who enter find peace within its walls. Peace. What a beautiful, impossible dream. Sarah. She looked up to find Silas standing at the edge of the ruins, his expression carefully neutral. The enforcer who'd arrested her, who'd saved her life in the forest, who now looked at her with something complicated in his eyes. The king is asking for you, he said. There's been a development. Sarah's stomach dropped. What kind of development? The kind that changes everything. Silas extended his hand to help her up. One of the rogues had something in his possession before he died. A sealed letter with the council's official wax mark. Her blood ran cold. Proof? Potentially, but you should see it yourself. They walked back to the temporary command center Damon had established in the guard barracks. Inside, Damon stood at a table covered with maps and documents, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. On the table, carefully laid out, was a letter written in elegant script. Damon looked up as she entered. Read it. Sarah approached the table, her heart hammering. The letter was brief but damning. The package will be delivered as arranged. Ensure the Omega does not survive the night. Her continued existence threatens the stability of the realm and must be eliminated. Upon confirmation of success, the remainder of your payment will be transferred through the usual channels. Destroy this correspondence immediately upon reading. V. Counselor Vera. This is treason, Silas said quietly. Conspiracy to commit murder against the king's mate. It carries the death penalty. It's also exactly what we needed, Damon said, though his voice held no triumph. Proof of council involvement. Grounds to arrest Vera and investigate the others who might be complicit. When do we move? Sarah asked. Damon's eyes met hers. Tonight, we return to the palace with this evidence and enough guards to prevent another attack. Vera will be arrested at dawn, and the other council members will be questioned under truth spells. They'll fight back, Sarah said. The council won't go quietly. Let them try. Damon's smile was cold and predatory. I'm done playing defense. It's time to remind the realm why the Blackwood line has ruled for 300 years. He reached out and took Sarah's hand, lacing their fingers together. The mate bond pulsed between them, stronger now than it had been even days ago, strengthened by shared danger and trust built in fire. We end this, he said. Together. Sarah squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his certainty. Together, but as they began preparations to return to the palace, as guards readied horses and weapons for the confrontation to come, Sarah couldn't shake the whisper in the back of her mind. Counselor Vera was cunning and ruthless. Would she really be careless enough to leave damning evidence with hired assassins? Or was this exactly what Vera wanted them to find? They left for the palace at dusk, a armed convoy of 30 guards surrounding the carriage that carried Sarah and Damon. The journey would take most of the night, bringing them to the palace gates just before dawn. The perfect time for a surprise arrest. Sarah sat across from Damon in the carriage, watching his profile as he reviewed documents by lamplight. He'd been strategizing with Silas for hours, planning every detail of Vera's arrest and the subsequent interrogations. What if it's a trap? She asked suddenly. Damon looked up. What? The letter. What if Vera wanted us to find it? What if she's expecting us to come charging back to the palace with evidence, and she's prepared a countermove? He was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then we'll adapt, but we can't ignore proof of treason just because it might be a trap. The council has to learn there are consequences for targeting you. They already think I'm cursed, dangerous. Sarah looked down at her hands. What if they're right? What if every person who gets close to me really does end up hurt or dead? Eleanor tried to kill me and lost everything. The rogues who attacked are dead. The estate staff lost their home. Stop. Damon crossed the carriage in one smooth movement and pulled her into his arms. None of that is your fault. You're not cursed, Sarah. You're being hunted by people who fear change, and there's a world of difference between those two things. She buried her face against his chest, breathing in his scent. I'm scared. I know. His hand stroked through her hair. So am I. But fear means we have something worth protecting. And I won't let them take you from me. I won't let them win. The carriage hit a bump in the road, jostling them both. Damon steadied her, his arms tightening protectively. Through the window, Sarah could see the dark forest passing by, moonlight filtering through the trees. Somewhere out there, enemies were planning her death. Somewhere behind them, an estate lay in ruins. And somewhere ahead, in the palace she'd briefly called home, a confrontation waited that would determine everything. Damon? She whispered. Yes? If something happens to me, if Vera has set a trap and things go wrong, I need you to promise me something. Nothing's going to happen. Promise me, she insisted, pulling back to look him in the eyes. Promise me you'll protect Lily, that you'll make sure she gets to grow up safe and free, even if I'm not there to see it. His jaw clenched. I promise. But you're going to be there, Sarah. You're going to watch her grow up yourself. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so desperately it hurt. Instead, she kissed him, pouring every unspoken fear and desperate hope into the press of her lips against his. He kissed her back with matching intensity, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious and breakable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damon rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens, he said quietly, we face it together. No more running, no more hiding, we fight. We fight. Sarah echoed. Outside the carriage, the night deepened. And ahead, in a palace built on centuries of tradition and power, a reckoning waited that would either forge a new future or destroy everything they'd fought to build. The choice, Sarah realized, had never really been theirs. The war had already begun. Chapter 7. The Palace Trap. They arrived at the palace gates, just as the first hints of dawn painted the sky in shades of gray and rose. Sarah had expected resistance guards questioning their early arrival, perhaps even a confrontation at the entrance. Instead, the gates stood open, as if they'd been expected, as if they'd been invited. Something's wrong, Silas said from his horse beside the carriage. His hand rested on his sword hilt, his entire body tense with alertness. Damon leaned out the carriage window, his eyes scanning the eerily quiet courtyard. Where are the guards? There should be at least 20 stationed here. The convoy rolled through the gates slowly, every soldier on high alert. The courtyard was empty not just of guards, but of everyone. No servants rushing to morning duties, no stable hands preparing horses, no sign of the bustling life that normally filled the palace at dawn. It's too quiet, Sarah whispered. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, every instinct screaming danger. Damon's hand found hers and squeezed once reassurance or goodbye. She couldn't tell. Stay in the carriage until I give the all clear. Damon, please, Sarah, just this once, let me protect you. Before she could argue, he was out of the carriage, Silas and a dozen guards forming a protective circle around him. They advanced toward the palace entrance, weapons drawn. That's when the screaming started. It came from inside the palace, a woman's shriek of terror that cut off abruptly, followed by the crash of breaking glass. Then more screams, dozens of them, overlapping in a cacophony of panic and pain. Go! Damon roared at his guards. Find the source. Protect the civilians. The guards scattered, rushing into the palace through multiple entrances. Damon turned back to the carriage, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Sarah, I need you to... The explosion ripped through the east wing. Fire and debris erupted into the sky, the blast wave strong enough to shake the ground beneath them. Sarah was thrown against the carriage wall, her ears ringing, her vision swimming. Through the window, she saw part of the palace collapsing, massive stones tumbling down in clouds of dust and smoke. And then, the rogues emerged. They poured out of the palace like a flood, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, not just attacking guards but civilians too. Sarah watched in horror as servants ran screaming from the building, pursued by wolves with blood-matted fur and wild eyes. This wasn't an assassination attempt. This was a massacre. Defensive positions. Damon's voice cut through the chaos. His guards rallied, forming lines to protect the fleeing civilians. Damon himself shifted mid-stride, his massive black wolf launching into the fray with devastating force. Sarah's hands shook as she gripped the carriage window frame. She should stay hidden. She should stay safe. That's what Damon wanted. But a little girl no older than Lily stumbled out of the palace entrance, crying and disoriented. A rogue spotted her, veering away from the main battle to pursue easier prey. Sarah didn't think. She threw open the carriage door and ran. "Hey!" she screamed, waving her arms to draw the rogue's attention. "Over here." The rogue's head snapped toward her, and she saw the moment it recognized her. The wolfless Omega, the primary target. It abandoned the child immediately and charged. Sarah had no weapons, no wolf, no way to defend herself. But she'd bought the little girl time to run, time to find safety. That would have to be enough. The rogue leaped, claws extended, jaws wide. A gray blur intercepted it mid-air, Silas in wolf form, slamming into the rogue with bone-crushing force. They rolled across the courtyard in a tangle of teeth and claws. Silas was bigger, better trained, but the rogue fought with the desperate savagery of someone who knew death was coming regardless. Sarah scrambled backward, her eyes searching for the little girl. She spotted her being pulled to safety by one of Damon's guards, and relief flooded through her. Then she saw the council. They emerged from the main palace entrance, all 12 of them, calm and collected while chaos raged around them. Councillor Thane led them, his silver hair immaculate, his expression one of cold satisfaction, and at his side, wearing a smile that made Sarah's blood run cold, was Councillor Vera. "Damon!" Sarah screamed. "It's a trap, the council." Her words were cut off as someone grabbed her from behind, a hand clamping over her mouth. She struggled, but the grip was iron strong, and she smelled wolfsbane, the poison that weakened even shifters, that made her wolfless body go limp and unresponsive. Finally, a woman's voice whispered in her ear. "The abomination is caught." Sarah's vision swam as she was dragged backward, away from the battle, away from Damon. She tried to fight, tried to scream, but the wolfsbane was spreading through her system, making her limbs heavy and useless. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Damon's black wolf turning, his amber eyes finding her across the chaos. She felt his rage and terror through the bond, felt him try to reach her, but Councillor Thane stepped into his path, and behind him, 11 other council members formed a wall between the Alpha King and his mate. Then everything went black. Sarah woke to cold stone against her cheek and the taste of blood in her mouth. She was in a cell, small and dark, lit only by a single torch guttering in a wall sconce. The walls were smooth stone, no windows, no obvious exits besides the heavy iron door, and everywhere, carved into the stone in intricate patterns, were symbols that made her skin crawl. Runes. Ancient magic meant to contain and suppress. She tried to stand, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The wolfsbane was still in her system, making every movement feel like pushing through water. She managed to prop herself against the wall, her head spinning. "You're awake. Good." Sarah's head jerked toward the voice. Councillor Vera stood outside the cell, watching her through the barred window in the door. The older woman's expression was pleasant, almost friendly, which somehow made everything worse. "Where am I?" Sarah's voice came out as a rasp. "The old dungeons, deep beneath the palace, where the ancient kings kept their most dangerous prisoners." Vera's smile widened. "Where no one will find you until we want them to. Damon will come for me." "Will he?" Vera tilted her head, considering. "By now, the king is likely fighting for his life against the rogues we unleashed." "Oh, don't look so shocked, dear. Did you really think that letter was genuine evidence? It was bait. The oldest trick in existence: give your enemy exactly what they want to find, and they'll walk right into your trap." Sarah's stomach dropped. "You wanted us to come back." "Of course. You were too well protected at the northern estate, and the king was too alert after the first assassination attempt. We needed to draw you both back to familiar ground, somewhere we controlled every advantage." Vera gestured expansively. "The rogue attack serves multiple purposes. It keeps the king busy while we secure you. It demonstrates that his claim to have changed the system has only brought chaos, and most importantly, it gives us the perfect scapegoat." "For what?" "For your tragic death, of course." Vera's tone was matter-of-fact, like discussing the weather. "You see, the official story will be that rogues infiltrated the palace seeking revenge against the king. In the chaos, they captured and killed you before the king could save you. A terrible tragedy. The realm will mourn appropriately. Damon won't believe that. The king will believe what we tell him to believe, especially when we present him with your body." Vera's eyes glittered with malice, or what's left of it, after we're finished. Terror clawed at Sarah's throat, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Why? Why do you hate me so much?" "Hate you?" Vera laughed, the sound echoing off stone walls. "Child, I don't hate you. I barely think of you at all, except as a problem to be solved. You're not a person to me, you're a symptom of a disease infecting our carefully ordered world." She moved closer to the door, her face visible now in the torchlight. For centuries, we've maintained perfect stability. Everyone knows their place. Alphas lead, betas support, omegas submit. The strong survive, the weak serve. It's clean, efficient, natural. It's cruel, Sarah spat. It's necessary. Vera's composure cracked for just a moment, passion bleeding through. Do you know what happens when you start making exceptions? When you tell wolfless omegas they're worthy of power? When you suggest that strength comes in forms other than tooth and claw? The entire system collapses. Chaos replaces order. The weak begin to think they deserve what the strong have earned. You're afraid, Sarah realized. You're terrified that if people like me are allowed to exist, to thrive, then your power means nothing. Your entire identity is built on being better than others, and you can't handle the idea that maybe, just maybe, you're not. Vera's hand slammed against the door, making Sarah flinch. You understand nothing. Nothing. I've spent 50 years maintaining the balance that keeps this realm from tearing itself apart. I've made hard decisions, done things that haunt me, all to preserve order. And then, you, a worthless, wolfless omega, seduce the king with your false vulnerability, and threaten to undo everything. I didn't seduce anyone. Daemon chose me. The king made a mistake. An understandable one. You're pretty enough, and your little act of sacrifice at the moon trial was certainly theatrical. But mistakes can be corrected. Will be corrected. Vera's smile returned, colder than before. The king will grieve. He'll rage. But eventually, he'll accept what happened and choose a proper mate. Someone worthy of standing at his side. Someone strong. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. You're going to kill me. Eventually. But first we need to extract a confession. A confession of what? I haven't done anything. Of conspiring with rogues to overthrow the king. Of using dark magic to seduce him and cloud his judgment. Of planning to poison the council and seize power. Vera counted off on her fingers. Oh, we have quite a list prepared. You'll confess to all of it, of course. Everyone confesses eventually. The door opened, and 2 guards entered carrying instruments that made Sarah's blood run cold. Knives, brands, things whose purpose she couldn't identify but whose intent was clear. Torture. I won't confess to lies, Sarah said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Yes, Vera said pleasantly. You will. They always do. The pain started small. A cut here, a burn there. Questions asked in calm voices, followed by agony when she didn't answer correctly. Sarah bit her tongue bloody to keep from screaming, refusing to give them the satisfaction. But as hours passed, or maybe days, time lost all meaning in the lightless cell. Her resolve began to crack. Just tell us what we want to hear, one of the guards said, almost kindly. Tell us you conspired against the king. Tell us you used dark magic. The words will end your pain. No, Sarah gasped through cracked lips. I won't. Won't lie. Another burn. This one on her shoulder, the mate mark Daemon had given her. She couldn't hold back the scream this time, the agony so intense it whited out her vision. Through the bond, she felt Daemon's answering rage. He was still alive, still fighting, still looking for her. Hold on, she thought desperately, hoping somehow he could hear her through their connection. I'm still here. Still fighting. The torture continued, but something strange began to happen. Each time they hurt her, each time pain exploded through her body, she felt something else. A heat building in her chest, spreading through her veins. Not the heat of the mate bond, something older, deeper, more primal. Enough. Vera's voice cut through the haze of pain. Let her rest. We'll resume tomorrow. By then, she'll be ready to confess anything to make it stop. The guards left, taking their instruments with them. Sarah collapsed against the wall, every part of her body screaming in agony. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds, and she couldn't tell anymore which parts hurt from burns and which from cuts. But she was alive. Broken and bleeding. But alive. And that strange heat in her chest was still growing, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. What is this? She wondered, through the fog of pain. What's happening to me? The torch guttered and died, plunging the cell into absolute darkness. And in that darkness, Something inside Sarah Ashwood finally woke up. Chapter 8. The Awakening. The darkness was absolute. Sarah lay curled on the cold stone floor, her body a map of pain, but beneath the agony, that strange heat continued to build, growing hotter with each breath she took. It felt alive. It felt like power. She'd spent 7 years believing she was broken, wolfless, powerless, a creature so fundamentally flawed that even her own family had rejected her. But lying in that dungeon cell, bleeding and tortured and facing death, Sarah began to understand something Damon had tried to tell her from the beginning. She wasn't powerless. She was just powerful in ways the world didn't recognize. The heat intensified, and Sarah gasped. It felt like something was unfurling inside her chest. Wings maybe, or fire, or something that had no name in any language ever spoken. She pressed her palms against the stone floor and tried to focus on the sensation, tried to understand what was happening. The stone beneath her hands began to glow. Faint at first, barely visible in the darkness, but as Sarah concentrated, as she let that mysterious heat guide her, the glow intensified. A soft, silver-white light emanated from her skin, painting the cell in ethereal radiance. Runes carved into the stone walls began to react. The containment magic Vera had so carefully woven started to fracture, cracks spreading like spiderwebs across the ancient symbols. Sarah's eyes snapped open. This wasn't possible. She was wolfless. Humans didn't have magic. Magic was reserved for shifters, for those with wolf blood running through their veins. But the glow continued to spread, and the runes continued to crack. Maybe, a voice whispered in her mind. Her own voice, but older somehow, echoing with authority she'd never possessed. Maybe you were never supposed to shift. Maybe your power was always meant to take a different form. Sarah pushed herself upright, her wounded body screaming in protest. The light continued to radiate from her skin, illuminating every detail of the cell, and as she looked at her hands in that strange glow, she saw something that made her breath catch. Marks were appearing on her skin, not scars, symbols, runes that matched the ones carved into the walls, but these were golden instead of gray, and they pulsed with that same heat that burned in her chest. She raised her hands, and the runes on the cell walls responded, the cracks spreading further. Stone groaned and shifted. "What are you?" a voice whispered from somewhere outside the cell. Sarah's head snapped toward the sound. Through the barred window in the door, she could see a figure, one of the guards, his face pale with terror as he stared at the glowing woman inside the supposedly inescapable cell. Sarah didn't answer. She simply raised her hand and pointed at the door. The iron door exploded outward. It didn't bend or break in any normal way. It simply disintegrated, atoms scattering like dust, leaving a perfect doorway where it had been. The guard shrieked and ran, his footsteps echoing down stone corridors. Sarah stood, unsteady but alive, her body wrapped in silver light. Every wound she'd sustained was still visible. The burns, the cuts, the blood dried across her skin. But the pain had transformed into something else, something that felt almost like power. She stepped out of the cell into a corridor lit by torches. The dungeon was old, carved from solid stone, with passages branching off in multiple directions. Sarah could hear voices somewhere above, the sound of the rogue attack continuing to rage above their heads. She had to get out, had to find Damon, had to stop Vera and this nightmare, before it consumed everything. Sarah closed her eyes and felt outward through the bond they'd forged. It was strained, tested by distance and magic, but still there, like a thread of starlight connecting her to him. She followed it. The battle raged across the palace grounds in chaos and blood. Damon, still in wolf form, fought with the desperate ferocity of someone who'd lost everything that mattered. Around him, his guards struggled against overwhelming numbers of rogues. The east wing of the palace was still burning, the inferno consuming priceless artifacts and irreplaceable history. But none of it mattered. Nothing mattered, except finding Sarah. He'd felt her terror through the bond, as she was taken, felt her pain as she was tortured, felt the slow dimming of her consciousness, as her body tried to shut down from the agony. He'd tried to reach her, tried to push past the distance, and the dark magic surrounding her cell. But she was so far away, locked in ancient magic he couldn't break. Then, suddenly, the bond flared. It burned through him like lightning, sudden and shocking and intense. Damon staggered, his wolf form wavering as he tried to process the sensation. Something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in Sarah. He felt her power for the first time, not the strength of a shifter's wolf, but something older and deeper and infinitely more complex. He felt her waking up to herself, claiming something she'd never known she possessed. Damon's eyes blazed pure gold. He shifted back to human form and roared a command that made every wolf on the field freeze, friend and foe alike. Move. His guards scattered, creating a clear path from the palace entrance through the courtyard, and it was good timing because Sarah emerged from the palace just as Damon finished giving the order. She stepped out of the entrance wrapped in silver light, and every rogue on the field went absolutely still. The light that surrounded her was unlike anything the wolves had ever seen. It wasn't the warm glow of a shifter's power. It was cold and ancient and terrifying, the kind of light that came from something fundamentally different from what they were. The torches on the palace walls flared suddenly, all igniting at once. The rogue corpses scattered across the courtyard began to glow with that same sickly silver light, and when Sarah raised her hand, they stood up. Not as living things, as puppets, as reanimated flesh given just enough animation to move. The rogues who'd been fighting for their lives against Damon's guards suddenly found themselves facing their own dead, twisted and wrong and moving with jerky, unnatural motions. Many of them broke and ran. Sarah walked down the palace steps slowly, her gaze sweeping across the courtyard, where her feet touched the ground. Silver light bloomed in intricate patterns, the same runes that marked her skin, spreading across the stone. Damon felt his wolf recoil, not in fear, but in awe, in recognition of something ancient awakening. "Sarah," he called out, his voice uncertain for the first time since he'd known her. She turned to look at him, and her eyes glowed with that same silver light. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that didn't come from a human throat. "I'm here," she said. "I'm still here." Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. Damon caught her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than she should have been, as if part of her had become incorporeal. The light faded from her skin, leaving behind the marks. The runes now burned permanently into her flesh, like tattoos of pure silver. "Get the healer," Damon roared. "Now." Guards scattered, searching for Margot among the chaos. But as Damon lowered Sarah to the ground, he could see she was barely breathing. Her body was shutting down from the torture, from the exertion, from whatever she'd just unleashed. "Hold on," he thought desperately, pressing his forehead against hers. "Please hold on. I can't lose you. Not now. Not like this." Through the bond, he felt something. Not a response, exactly, but a presence. Like she was still there, still fighting, even though her consciousness had retreated somewhere deep inside herself. Margot appeared, breathless and shocked. She took one look at Sarah's battered body, and the runes covering her skin, and went pale. "What happened to her?" the healer demanded. "I don't know." Damon's voice cracked. "But she was tortured by the council. She needs to be somewhere safe. Somewhere I can work." Margot was already assessing wounds, her healer's mind taking over from the shock. "The palace isn't secure. We need to move her immediately. The guards are fighting a losing battle." And Margot gestured toward the courtyard, where the reanimated corpses were beginning to collapse, their borrowed animation fading. The remaining rogues were retreating toward the forest, and Damon's guards were regrouping. "Your Majesty, you need to decide. Defend the palace or save her life. You can't do both right now." Damon looked at Sarah's broken body, then at the palace he'd ruled for 15 years. Stone and gold and symbols of power, nothing compared to the woman in his arms. "Take her to the northern sanctuary," he commanded Silas, who'd shifted back to human form and was bloody but alive. The one across the border, where Lily is being kept. Margot goes with her. I don't care what you have to do. Keep her safe. What about the council? Silas asked. What about Vera? I'll handle the council. Damon's expression had gone cold and terrible. Right now, I need to remind them why they fear me. He stood, lifting Sarah's unconscious form. For just a moment, he held her against his chest, breathing in her scent, grateful beyond measure that she was alive. Then he handed her to Silas and Margot, watching as they spirited her away into the pre-dawn darkness. Only then did Damon turn to face the palace, his eyes blazing pure gold. It was time for the Alpha King to deal with traitors. The throne room was exactly as Damon had left it. The 12 council members stood in a line before his throne, their expressions ranging from triumph to uncertainty. Vera was there, front and center, her confidence unshaken, even as she watched the Alpha King stride toward her dripping with blood and rage. Your Majesty, she began, her voice steady. As you can see, we've successfully eliminated the threat to the realm. The wolfless Omega has been... Damon's hand shot out, grabbing her by the throat and lifting her off the ground. He held her there, suspended, his strength absolute. She's alive, he said quietly. And she's more powerful than all of you combined will ever be. Vera's face was turning purple, her hands clawing at his grip. Impossible, she's wolfless. She's not wolfless. Damon's voice was ice. She's something you don't have words for, something your narrow minds couldn't comprehend. My wolf recognized her the moment she offered her throat, recognized that she was exactly what I needed, exactly what this realm needs. He threw her across the throne room. She crashed into a marble pillar and slid to the ground, gasping and coughing. You conspired to murder the queen, Damon continued, his gaze sweeping across each council member. You hired rogues. You orchestrated attacks. You tortured her. His voice dropped to something that sounded almost inhuman. For those crimes, you will answer. Your Majesty. Another counselor stepped forward. A younger man Damon recognized as having voted against the mate bond, but never participated in the assassination attempts. We were wrong. We see that now. Please, show mercy. Mercy? Damon laughed, and the sound was broken glass and burning cathedrals. You tortured an innocent woman. You burned my estate. You brought chaos and death to the very people you were sworn to protect. There is no mercy for that. He raised his hand, and the guards flooded in. Take them, he commanded. All of them. Hold them in the cells pending trial. Anyone who tries to escape will be executed immediately. Anyone who tries to interfere will answer to me personally. As the guards hauled the struggling council members away, Damon felt the weight of his decision settle on his shoulders like a stone. He'd just arrested the entire council, declared war on the system that had sustained his realm for 300 years. For one woman. But as he felt the faint pulse of the mate bond, Sarah's presence somewhere in the darkness beyond the palace, he knew he'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. Some things were worth burning the world for. 3 days later, Damon stood at the edge of the sanctuary, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Sarah was still unconscious. Margot said the healing would take time, that whatever power had awakened inside her had burned through her body like a wildfire, and now it needed to rebuild what had been destroyed. But she was alive, and the runes that covered her skin had begun to glow faintly in the darkness, a sign that her power was settling, integrating into her being on a fundamental level. She's magnificent, Lily said from beside him. Damon looked down at the little girl, who'd attached herself to his side the moment she learned he'd come to the sanctuary. She was clutching a stuffed rabbit, and looking at Sarah's sleeping form with absolute devotion. Yes, Damon agreed. She is. Will she wake up? Lily asked. Yes. Soon, I think. He hoped. Gods, he hoped. And then we can be a family? Lily's voice was small and hopeful. All of us together? Damon felt something crack open in his chest. A family, something he'd never had, never really believed in. But looking at this little girl who'd inspired Sarah's sacrifice, and thinking of the woman who'd crossed every boundary, challenged every law, defied every convention, to protect someone who wasn't even hers. "Yes," he said softly, "then we can be a family." If Sarah's awakening moved you, subscribe, because what comes next will reshape everything you believed was possible. Comment. Tell me what you think Sarah's power really is, and what she'll do with it. Damon pulled Lily close, and together they watched the sunrise, waiting for the woman who'd burned down the old world and promised to build something better from the ashes. Chapter 9. Rebirth. Sarah woke to the smell of jasmine and honey. For a long moment, she simply lay in darkness, trying to remember how to breathe, how to exist in a body that felt both familiar and completely foreign. Pain still echoed through her limbs. The ghost of torture. The memory of agony, but it was distant now. Muted beneath something else. Power. Raw. Ancient power thrumming through her veins like a second heartbeat. She opened her eyes slowly. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, painting the room in soft gold. She was in a bed, a real bed with silk sheets and down pillows, and someone had wrapped her wounds with careful precision. The marks on her skin, the runes glowed faintly beneath the bandages. The door opened quietly, and Margot entered carrying a tray of food and medicine. The healer's expression shifted from professional concern to shock when she saw Sarah's eyes open. "You're awake," Margot said, setting down the tray with trembling hands. "Thank the gods. You've been unconscious for 5 days. We weren't sure I'd what?" Sarah's voice came out as a rasp. "Wake up? Survive." Margot helped her sit up carefully, supporting her back with pillows. "What you did in that courtyard, the power you unleashed, it burned through your body like fire. I've never seen anything like it. The runes on your skin, the way you reanimated those bodies, the magic that surrounded you." The healer trailed off, clearly struggling to find words adequate to describe what she'd witnessed. "What am I?" Sarah asked quietly. "I don't know," Margot admitted. "I've studied healing magic for 40 years, and I've never encountered anything like your condition. The runes, they're not shifter magic. They're something older, something that predates the pacts and the territorial systems. Something." She paused, searching for the right word. "Primal." Sarah looked down at her hands. Even through the bandages, she could see the silver glow of the runes, pulsing faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat. She raised one hand experimentally, and watched as the light brightened, spreading across her palm. On the table beside the bed, a glass of water began to tremble. Sarah gasped and jerked her hand back. The glass stilled. "Don't be afraid," Margot said gently. "Your power is responding to your emotions. As you gain control, you'll learn to direct it. But right now, you need rest and sustenance. Eat." Sarah wasn't hungry, but she forced herself to consume the broth and bread Margot provided. With each spoonful, she felt her strength slowly returning. Not the strength of a shifter's wolf, but something deeper and more fundamental. After Margot left, Sarah sat alone with her thoughts, and the strange new power thrumming through her body. She tried to understand what had happened in that cell. One moment she'd been breaking under torture, ready to give up, and the next, she'd felt something awaken inside her. Something that had always been there. Waiting. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. The door opened, and Damon stepped inside. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Damon's face was drawn with exhaustion, dark circles beneath his amber eyes. He was dressed in simple black clothing, and there was blood staining his hands, not his own. Sarah could tell, but others. "You're awake," he said, and his voice held such raw relief it made her chest ache. "Damon." She reached out her hand, and he crossed the room in 3 long strides to take it. His grip was gentle but desperate, like she might disappear if he didn't hold on tight enough. "I'm sorry," he said, dropping to his knees beside her bed. "I should have protected you better. Should have seen the trap. Should have—" "Stop." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You did everything you could, more than anyone could have asked, and you found me." "You found yourself," Damon corrected. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her palm, just above where the runes glowed brightest. What you did in that courtyard, Sarah, I've never seen anything like it. You terrified every rogue on that field. You awakened something ancient. I don't know what I am, Sarah whispered. Neither do I. But I know what I felt through the bond when your power manifested. Damon's eyes met hers, burning with intensity. I felt completion. My wolf recognized your power the same way it recognized you as mate, like all the pieces of some cosmic puzzle finally clicked into place. Sarah wanted to believe him, but doubt whispered in her mind. The council will say I'm cursed, that my power is dark magic meant to destroy the realm. Let them. Damon's smile was fierce and proud. The council is in chains awaiting trial. Vera tried to have you killed, Sarah. She orchestrated everything, the poisoning, the fire, the torture. She's confessed to all of it under truth spell. Relief flooded through Sarah, but it was mixed with complicated feelings. She'd wanted proof of their guilt, wanted to see them brought to justice, but the thought of Vera and the others languishing in cells, awaiting execution, it sat uneasily in her chest. What will happen to them? She asked. They'll stand trial. The evidence is overwhelming. Most will likely face execution for treason and attempted murder. Damon watched her carefully. Does that trouble you? They tried to kill me. They tortured me. They destroyed your estate and killed innocent people. Sarah said the words, and they were true. But she could also see Vera's face, hear the woman's voice explaining her motivations. Fear. That's all it had been. Fear of change. Fear of losing power. Fear of a world that didn't fit her narrow understanding. I don't want them to die, Sarah said quietly. I want them to understand, to see that they were wrong. Damon's expression grew complicated. That's not how justice works in our world, Sarah. Traitors face death. It's the law. Then maybe the law needs to change. For a long moment, Damon simply stared at her. Then he laughed, a real, genuine laugh that echoed through the room. You're incredible. You know that? 5 days ago, you were tortured within an inch of your life. You should be demanding vengeance. Instead, you're asking for mercy. They didn't create the system that valued cruelty over compassion. They were just trapped in it. Sarah met his gaze. Like I was trapped in being wolfless. Like you might have been trapped as a king who only knew how to rule through fear. But Damon took her face in his hands, careful of her injuries. When you're healed, we're going to remake this realm together, you and me. We're going to change the laws, challenge the traditions, build something better. What if I'm not strong enough? The fear slipped out before she could stop it. You faced down the most powerful alphas in the realm and told them their system was broken. You survived torture without breaking. You awakened magic that shouldn't exist in a wolfless Omega. His eyes blazed gold with conviction. Sarah, you are stronger than anyone I've ever known. Not because of shifting, or claws, or physical power, but because you refuse to break. You refuse to become what they tried to make you. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and Sarah felt the bond between them strengthen, not just the magical tether of the claiming mark, but something real and true built on trust and choice and mutual recognition. When they broke apart, Sarah rested her forehead against his. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, Damon said. But we're scared together, and that makes all the difference. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the sanctuary's garden, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Her body had healed far faster than anyone expected. Margot said it was the power of the runes, accelerating her natural healing process. The wounds were gone now, but the marks remained silver lines across her skin that glowed brighter when she used her magic. She'd been practicing, trying to understand the limits and parameters of her newfound abilities. She could move objects with thought. She could heal wounds with a touch. She could see things that others couldn't, magical presences, hidden energies, the subtle currents of power that flowed through all living things. But most importantly, she could feel others' emotions, not as invasive as mind-reading, but close. She could sense pain, fear, joy, anger. It made her want to help people, to ease suffering wherever she encountered it. You're getting stronger, a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to find a woman she'd never seen before, tall and lean, with silver hair braided in an intricate pattern and eyes that glowed faintly gold. The woman wore robes that seemed to shimmer between solid and translucent, and there was something fundamentally otherworldly about her presence. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew. "My name is Alara. I'm a keeper, one of the ancient order that guards the old magic." The woman smiled, and it was kind but sad. "I've been watching you, Sarah Ashwood, watching your power manifest and grow. Why? Because your awakening was not an accident. You were always meant to carry this magic. Your mother—" "My mother?" Sarah's voice caught. She hadn't thought about her mother in years, had locked away the pain of that rejection. "Your mother was also a keeper, though she never knew it. The magic skipped her generation, lay dormant in her bloodline. But when you were born wolfless, it was because the power needed a vessel, a form it could take that wasn't constrained by shifter magic." Sarah's mind reeled. Why didn't anyone know this? Why did everyone think I was broken? Because the keepers have been hidden for centuries, watching from the shadows, protecting the old magic from those who would misuse it. Alara's expression grew serious. "The council knows about us. They fear us. For centuries, they've worked to suppress anyone who showed signs of the old magic awakening. When they discovered you were wolfless, they thought they'd eliminated the threat. But I survived. You did more than survive." Alara gestured around the garden, and Sarah saw flowers blooming, where none had been a moment before. "You awakened. You claimed your power. And now the question becomes, what will you do with it?" "Help people," Sarah said immediately. "Protect those who can't protect themselves. Change the laws and systems that oppress the powerless." Alara smiled. "The Alpha King chose well. Together, you might actually succeed in remaking this realm." "What about you?" Sarah asked. "What will you do?" "My order and I will step out of the shadows. We'll help you. We'll teach you to master your power. And when the time comes, we'll stand with you against those who would return to the old ways." Alara extended her hand. "If you'll have us." Sarah took it, and felt power flow between them, old and deep and filled with purpose. "I'll have you," she said. "We'll need all the help we can get." That evening, Damon arrived at the sanctuary with news from the capital. The trials had begun. Council members were being brought before a special court, their crimes laid bare before the realm. Evidence of torture, conspiracy, and treason filled the record, but Sarah asked for something unprecedented. She requested an audience with Counselor Vera. Damon was against it. "She tortured you. She tried to have you killed. You don't owe her anything, let alone forgiveness." "I'm not going to forgive her," Sarah said. "I'm going to show her something." The meeting took place in a neutral room in the capital's justice building. Vera was brought in chains, her hair unkempt, her fine clothes replaced with gray prison garb. When she saw Sarah, her expression twisted with a complex mixture of rage and fear. "The abomination," she spat. "Come to gloat before my execution?" "I came to show you something," Sarah said calmly. She raised her hand, and the runes on her skin flared with brilliant silver light. In the air before Vera, an image formed a vision of what the realm could become. A future where wolfless omegas thrived and contributed, where strength was measured in compassion and creativity, not just physical power, where no one was discarded or cast out. Vera stared at the vision, and for a moment, Sarah felt the woman's terror and despair through her empathic connection. "This is what you feared," Sarah said quietly. "A world where people like me could exist, where your narrow definition of strength didn't apply anymore." "It's chaos," Vera whispered. "It's change." Sarah let the vision fade. "And I'm asking you to choose something different, to testify truthfully about why you did what you did, to help us understand the fear that drove the council to such extremes. And in exchange, I'm asking the court for mercy, exile instead of execution." Vera's head snapped up, shock clear on her face. "Why would you offer me mercy after what I've done?" "Because killing you won't make the realm better. But understanding you might." Sarah turned to leave. "The choice is yours, counselor. But know this. The old world is ending. The question is whether you'll help us build something better, or whether you'll cling to the past until it consumes you entirely." She left the room before Vera could respond, but not before she felt the shift in the woman's emotions. Still anger, still fear, but underneath, something new, a crack in the armor of absolute conviction. Maybe it would be enough. Maybe it wouldn't. But Sarah had learned that change didn't come from breaking people. It came from showing them a vision of something better and trusting that enough of them would choose to build it. Chapter 10. The New Dawn. 1 year later. The palace had been rebuilt, transformed from a monument to old power into something new. The rigid lines and intimidating grandeur had been softened with gardens and open courtyards. The throne room now had windows that let in natural light, and the marble floors had been inscribed with the same runes that marked Sarah's skin symbols of the old magic, now integrated into the realm's foundation. Sarah stood in one of those gardens, watching Lily chase butterflies through beds of wildflowers. The little girl had grown in the past year, not just in height, but in confidence and joy. She was safe now, truly safe, and she knew it. "She's beautiful," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to find Counselor Vera approaching. The older woman was no longer dressed in gray prison garb, but in simple, dignified clothing. She'd chosen exile over execution, but not the kind Sarah had initially offered. Instead, she'd chosen to stay and help rebuild the systems she'd worked so hard to maintain. It had been difficult. Many in the realm wanted her dead. But Sarah had fought for a different kind of justice, restorative, rather than punitive. Vera would spend the rest of her life undoing the harm she'd caused, working to integrate wolfless omegas into pack society, challenging the prejudices she'd spent decades cultivating. It was, in many ways, a harder sentence than death. "She is," Sarah agreed. "I still can't believe how much she's grown." "Children do that." Vera watched Lily play for a moment. "I've been thinking about what you said to me in that interrogation room, about the old world ending. Have you come to terms with it?" Sarah asked gently. "I'm learning to." Vera's voice was heavy with regret. "I spent my entire life building walls, defining who belonged and who didn't, creating a system that fed my sense of power and control. And then you came along, a wolfless omega who refused to be defined by those categories, and I couldn't accept it. I saw you as a threat instead of as a person. I understand." And Sarah did, which surprised both of them. Fear makes people do terrible things. Yes. But understanding that doesn't erase what I've done. Vera turned to look at Sarah directly. "I tortured you. That's not something that can be simply forgiven." "No," Sarah agreed. "It can't. But it can be worked through. You're doing that now, every day, by helping others who were oppressed by the system you created." Vera nodded slowly. "Damon told me you're planning to open a sanctuary for wolfless omegas in the capital, a place where they can train and develop their abilities without fear. With your help, if you're willing." Sarah met the older woman's eyes. "You understand the prejudices we're fighting. You can help us overcome them." For a moment, Vera looked like she might refuse. Then she bowed her head. "Yes, I'll help." That evening, Sarah met with Damon in their private chambers. The king had aged in the past year, his face more lined, his shoulders carrying the weight of the reforms they'd implemented. But his eyes still burned with the same fierce determination that had drawn her to him in the first place. "The council confirmations went through," he reported, dropping into a chair by the fireplace. "The new members are more balanced, equal representation from alphas, betas, and omegas. We've also formalized the law regarding wolfless individuals' rights." "How many council members refuse to serve?" Sarah asked, settling beside him. 7. They've chosen to go into voluntary exile rather than accept a system where omegas have equal power. Damon's smile was bitter. "Some traditions die hard. But they're dying," Sarah said. She picked up his hand and laced her fingers through his. "That matters." "It does." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to the runes that marked her wrist. In the past year, the marks had spread. They now covered her arms, her shoulders, and spiraled down her spine in intricate patterns. Each rune represented a person she'd healed, a wrong she'd helped right. They were a map of her journey, visible to anyone who cared to look. "Alara told me something interesting today." "What?" "There are other keepers emerging throughout the realm. Other wolfless individuals whose power is finally awakening now that the old magic is no longer being suppressed. Damon pulled her close. You've opened a door that can't be closed, Sarah. The world is changing. Are you afraid? She asked. Terrified, he admitted. But in the way you're supposed to be terrified when standing at the edge of something unknown. The kind of fear that means you're actually alive. Sarah nestled against him, listening to the steady beat of his heart through the bond they shared. The mate mark on her neck pulsed gently. Their connection had only grown stronger in the past year, deepening into something that transcended the supernatural bond into genuine love. I want to show you something, she said, rising and pulling him toward the window. From their vantage point high in the palace, they could see the entire capital. The city had changed. New buildings were being constructed, sanctuaries for wolfless omegas, libraries where the old magic was being studied, hospitals where healers like Margot worked alongside keepers to develop new forms of medicine. The rigid class structure was collapsing, not everywhere at once, but gradually, one person and one choice at a time. It's beautiful, Damon whispered. It's messy, Sarah corrected. There's still resistance. Some packs refuse to acknowledge the new laws. Some alphas are retreating into traditionalism. We haven't won yet. But we're winning, Damon said. Slowly but surely. We're winning. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the newly opened sanctuary for awakening keepers and watched as a young wolfless omega successfully lifted a stone using nothing but her power and will. The girl, her name was Maya, and she was only 16, looked shocked and thrilled in equal measure. Around her, a dozen other young omegas watched with hope burning in their eyes. These were the forgotten ones, the cast-offs and discarded. And now they were discovering that they weren't broken. They were just different. Alara moved through the sanctuary, teaching and guiding, her ancient knowledge proving invaluable as more and more keepers awakened. The old order that had hidden in shadows for centuries was finally stepping into the light. They're remarkable, Lily said, appearing beside Sarah. The little girl was now 7 years old and had taken to visiting the sanctuary regularly. She loved watching the young keepers discover their power, and Sarah suspected it was because Lily saw her own journey reflected in theirs. They are, Sarah agreed. She took Lily's hand. Do you remember when you were scared and alone in that alley? I remember. Lily squeezed her hand. But I also remember you coming to save me, and now we're saving others. Sarah said softly. That's how change happens. One person at a time. One act of courage at a time. The Moon Trial Monument had been rebuilt. Instead of a place of judgment and death, it was now a memorial, a celebration of transformation and rebirth. The stone circle remained, but now it was inscribed with the names of every person who'd been wrongfully condemned under the old system. Hundreds of names. Thousands of names. A record of the lives sacrificed to an unjust law. Sarah stood in the center of that circle, watching as the full moon rose over the capital. Exactly 1 year ago to this night, she'd offered her throat on this very spot, expecting to die. Instead, she'd been reborn. Penny, for your thoughts? Damon appeared beside her, taking her hand. I was thinking about how much can change in a year, Sarah said. How one choice can ripple outward and transform everything. Your choice, Damon corrected. You chose to protect Lily. You chose to stand up to the council. You chose to offer mercy instead of seeking revenge. All of those choices led to this. Our choices, Sarah corrected gently. You chose to mark me when the entire realm told you not to. You chose to fight for me when it would have been easier to let me go. You chose to change a system that had worked for 300 years. Damon pulled her close, and they swayed together beneath the full moon. Around them, the capital glowed with lights, not just artificial lights, but the gentle glow of keeper magic, woven into the very fabric of the city. I love you, Damon said simply. I love you too, Sarah replied. And she did, not because of the bond that connected them, not because of destiny or fate, but because he'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. Because he'd chosen her, actively and deliberately, again and again. The music of the celebration drifted up from the capital below, a festival marking the anniversary of the moon trial that had changed everything. People were dancing, singing, celebrating a future that looked different from anything they'd imagined a year ago. Sarah thought about Vera, working in the sanctuary to help integrate wolfless omegas into society. She thought about Eleanor, who'd chosen mercy over execution, and now worked to rebuild trust with those she'd betrayed. She thought about the council members in exile, grappling with the fact that the world had moved on without them. She thought about all the young keepers discovering their power, all the wolfless omegas no longer being treated as property, all the lives being saved because someone had been brave enough to challenge an unjust system. "What are you thinking now?" Damon asked, watching her face. "That strength isn't about being unbreakable," Sarah said. "It's about being willing to break and then choosing to rebuild yourself into something stronger, something truer." If Sarah's journey moved you, if you believed in her when the world called her cursed, subscribe. Because every underdog deserves an audience that stands with them until the very end. Tell in the comment how Sarah's story changed the way you think about what real strength looks like. Damon smiled and kissed her beneath the full moon, and Sarah felt the bond between them sing with completion and contentment. The old world had ended. The new world was just beginning, and Sarah Ashwood, wolfless omega, awakened keeper, future queen, stood at the center of it all, ready to guide her realm toward a future built on compassion instead of cruelty, on acceptance instead of judgment, on love instead of fear. The omega who'd offered her throat to save a child had become something far greater than anyone had imagined. She'd become hope itself. Epilogue. 3 years later, the coronation of Queen Sarah Ashwood took place on a clear spring morning, with flowers blooming throughout the capital and keepers weaving ancient magic through every stone and beam. She wore a crown not of gold and jewels, but of pure silver light, a manifestation of her own power, shaped into a symbol of her reign. Her gown was white and silver, embroidered with the runes that marked her skin, transforming her very appearance into a walking declaration of everything she represented. Damon stood beside her, his hand never leaving hers. As the High Keeper placed the crown on Sarah's head, a roar went up from the crowd. Not the roar of fear or submission that had greeted previous monarchs, but the roar of recognition, of hope, of a people seeing themselves reflected in their ruler. Lily stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face, holding flowers she'd grown using magic she'd begun to develop over the past 3 years. Even wolfless omegas could be keepers, and Lily had discovered hers. Vera stood with the other reformed council members, her expression complicated but genuine as she watched the girl she'd tortured become queen. The realm had changed. Laws had been rewritten. Entire systems had been dismantled and rebuilt. There was still resistance in some territories, still those who clung to the old ways, but the momentum had shifted. The future belonged to those brave enough to imagine something different. As Damon and Sarah walked through the palace together, hand in hand, the new queen of the Northern Territories thought about the girl she'd been wolfless, exiled, broken. She thought about the choice to protect Lily that had changed everything. And she smiled, because sometimes the smallest act of courage echoes across eternity. Sometimes one person's refusal to break can reshape an entire world. Sometimes the weakest among us holds the key to transformation. Sometimes an omega's throat, offered in sacrifice, becomes the price of salvation. And sometimes, just sometimes, the cursed become the blessed. The story had begun at a moon trial, with an omega offering her life to save a child. It had ended on a coronation day, with a queen beginning her reign dedicated to ensuring that no one would ever again be forced to make that choice. Between beginning and end, everything had changed, and that, as it turned out, was the most beautiful transformation of all.